Thanks a lot for having me. I'm Maxi. I'm from the Institute for Innovation and Change Management. And I want to talk with you today about corporate values and scenarios as orientation frameworks in times of volatility. And behind that, we will find the sweet spot for OKR implementation. But before we dive into this topic, let me briefly introduce you to the IICM. The Institute for Innovation and Change Methodology is a leading consulting and research boutique focusing on the interplay of innovation, change, and communication. As we come from the methodological approach, we are enabled to facilitate culture, creativity, and the courage to embrace change across industries and functions. With our customers, we work on large, multi-annual transformation programs, but also on small transformation projects, which are triggered mostly by drivers as digitalization, new work, or sustainability. We are around 30 employees, founded 2011, and our vision is to really develop people's and organizational full potential. So that's what we are aiming for. Okay. So the most of you are probably familiar with the term VUCA or BANI. VUCA stands for volatility. It's about uncertainty. We talk a lot about complex situations and also about ambiguity when it's not really clear if things are black or white. And there's also this acronym called BANI. It describes like brittle structures, an anxious environment which is fired by news media and nonlinear causal effects, which are really incomprehensible and hard to understand. And backing this situation, it's really getting harder and harder to make really good decisions within an organization. And this is especially true when we talk about decisions which have a far-reaching impact. So for this reason, we really need to give a lot of orientation as managers and leaders into the organization in order to navigate through these volatile times. So what are orientation frameworks good for? They provide, at the one side, clear direction so employees can align their work with goals and vision. They let the organization make much more easier decisions as they serve as a basis for evaluating alternative course of actions. And they improve collaboration as they create a common language and an understanding of our goals and our vision. And last but not least, they create a continuity and a stability by guiding the organization through change and helping to maintain the organization's identity and focus. So, from our perspective, there are two orientation frameworks which needs to be considered particular. It's the one about the strategy and the foresight, and it's one about the values. We also can say the first one is the what. So this means what is our vision? What is our goal? What are our goals? And what is the strategy which we are pursuing? How does our future look like? What can we sense today, and what can we imagine in our future in order to transfer it later into the organization? And on the other side, it's really important to understand the way how we want to work together. So what are our values also? This is a really crucial part. And this is what we call, this framework, we call robust leadership. And that provides orientation for superior performance of organizations in volatile environments. But robust leadership is also designed for preparing an organization for change, or better said, for continuous change. And yeah, when we look at an OKR implementation, we can also say this is definitely in change. So, because it has a huge impact on the organization. So for that reason, robust leadership and living this framework really properly is also the sweet spot for OKR implementation. And I want to highlight one critical aspect which we just also had here discussed in the round in the Q&A from the session before. So of course it needs a lot of things to be considered when you want to bring such a framework to life, but this is a special one I want to highlight. It's about owning versus consuming. And it's exactly what we discussed before. It's about really like letting the employees, the people, participate on the one side and by creating their own values, but also in strategy process. So the way we do this is like we are setting up cross-hierarchical and cross-functional working models where a core group starts with a first draft of a strategy or with a set of values, and then we can cascade into the organization and we let the people give their input and let them share their perspectives and also let them share and create a common understanding. And this is really crucial in order to create this ownership, which is really relevant in order to bring, I would say, almost every framework to life. And of course, you have a rollout at the end where, for example, a trainer format then can implement the strategy or the values with dialogue formats to the rest of the organization. But at least at the beginning and in the process, the people of an organization had the possibility to bring in their perspectives and to create this common understanding. So let's now have a look about how in practice scenarios can be developed. And let's start with the question, what are scenarios? Scenarios are stories describing paths to plausible alternative futures that help us make better decisions today. So it's not about making predictions like artificial general intelligence will have his great breakthrough by the end of this year, or projections like the Bitcoin price 2 years ago was up to 60,000, so the next 2 years it must go again to the 60,000. That's a projection. We don't want to do that. We don't also want to have preferences in regards to specific scenarios. What we want to do is we want to create equally plausible images of the future. You could also say future narratives, stories of the future. And we do this by exploring the question, what if? What if a specific event would happen? What if a specific driver will change our world and will set us in a new scenario? And therefore we can, and with this, we can challenge existing assumptions and break up mental models. And this is at the end a great starting point for the development of new strategies or the testing existing ones. So again, it's not about the question, will it happen? It's about the question, what if something would happen? So scenarios can potentially identify weak trends and signals that could prove to be important for an organization. You can challenge assumptions, as I said, and break up mental models. They provide a framework for evaluating strategies, and they create a common understanding and provide guidance. But how are they developed? Let's have a look at those 3 circles here you see. The first one we call the contextual environment. There we have geopolitical trends, international finance, international commerce, legislation, macroeconomics, energy prices, social values, exchange rate, demographics, ecology, and also technology. And those you can only survey and appreciate. And no matter how hard Elon Musk or Stephen Wozniak try to influence that by saying, please do not develop further the artificial intelligence, they won't have any chance to really influence this. It will happen. So it's going to hit us. Then the second cycle, this is the transactional environment. And there we see the driving forces like making their power on it. It's the industry level. There we have our competitors, the lobbies, NGOs, investors, suppliers, employers, regulators, clients. And there we have a little bit of an opportunity to co-create or co-design and influence them. And only we as an actor, as an organization, we have full control. This is the place where we then can really act. So how typically we go in such a project in order to analyze those trends? So which trends are hitting the industry? This is a question which, of course, rises up at the beginning of such a scenario planning. So we do a lot of talks, we do the interviews, and we talk a lot with internal and external experts, also with external ones in order to be sure that we are up to date. And we check which trends come to the industry level and affect the industry and the organization from the perspective of the social perspective, from the technological one, from the economical one, ecological, and also from the political and legal. And so we make sure that we do not have any blind spots. And such trends, they are then described on those trends cards, as you can see here. For example, one could be artificial intelligence, as I just mentioned, and this is then well described there. And it's also what you can find here. You can find also the characteristic of such a trend, how hard it could develop or how fast it could develop, and what different states it could also have. And this is pretty important for the next step then when we go into the creation of a scenario matrix, because there we will have a look at the specific characteristics of the trends. But before coming there, you need to find out which ones are really important for me now, because we have gathered a lot of them, but which ones are so important for me as an organization. And there we look at especially two aspects. It's about the relevance or the impact of a driver to the industry or to my organization. So how hard would the impact be if the driver now would be here with full its power? Yeah? Is it very low or it's very high? And the next one on the x-axis, you can see the uncertainty. How certain or uncertain is it that they will come? And the ones which are on the left side up, they have a very low uncertainty, so they are almost here. And at the same time, when they're up, they're really relevant for my organization. And we call this the key assumptions. And the key assumptions of the drivers, in the mostly they're already like somewhere thought within the strategy. What we want to look at, we want to identify the key drivers. So the ones which have a really high uncertainty if they will come or not, or also the characteristic of the trend. How strong will AI develop in the next years? Do we know that? I'm not sure. And depending on that uncertainty question and also on a high relevance, we call those the key drivers, and with that ones we're going to work further within the scenario planning. So what we do in the next step, and you can do also with your organization, you pick out those which seem to you the best two ones to start a really good discussion about different scenarios which you then will have, because you put them one on the x-axis and one on the y-axis. And as I said before, the characteristics of these trends will also be placed then on the x-axis more on the left and the other on the right, and by the y-axis the same. So to make this a little bit more concrete, I brought you an illustration also from a scenario matrix, which is not a customer project, obviously, but I think it's good for explaining how the key drivers will be situated on this matrix. So we have here one key driver is called health and well-being on the x-axis, and the other one is artificial intelligence on the y-axis. So health and well-being will be a private thing on the one side, as you can see on the left, and on the right side we said health and well-being will be really important for the employer. And the same you do then with the other key driver, which is artificial intelligence in this case, and you can say, so there's no further development than the state today, which is on the bottom, or you have a really much more powerful AI in the future with a big change here. And then you can build up different scenarios, and you can dive in as an organization and create a great discussion with the employers and with your team in general in order to explore those futures and to answer the question, what would happen if we are in this situation? And how could we react? What implications will this have to our organization? And now you might ask yourself, so, but what about all the other trends which we identified, the other key drivers, because we only picked 2 of them. So what we did in the first step, we reduced complexity in order to create a discussion. So we just took the 2 ones which we said, so these ones are really suitable for a good discussion, and then you can pick the other ones, the other key drivers, and pull them inside each scenario and then evaluate inside the scenario how relevant are they and how would they evolve in such a scenario. And also this happens, of course, in discussions within the teams, and you start to get a really good share and common understanding about the trends and possible futures for your organization. So, but scenarios are more. They also create room for innovation and strategy development. So what we did in this example is that we had a look at these scenarios and asked ourselves, how would the target group of the futures look like, and what needs would they have in the future? And based on this information, we then created an innovation process and started to create a lot of product innovations and business model innovations. And in the next step, we also created focus fields, which helped us to develop further the strategy and also to align the vision. So scenarios are describing very good the business environment where I'm in. It gives me as an organization the possibility to check in regards to my OKR, to my strategy, to my vision, but it gives me also the opportunity, or for the team especially, the opportunity to see how they can contribute in terms to the vision or to different scenarios or to a new strategy. And of course also to myself in regards to my mindsets, because I start to learn that there is no one future, there might be many futures, and I start to realize that agile working might be really important for the future in order to be able to adapt fast and continuously. So let's now have a look also at the development of corporate values briefly. Values are only values if they are lived, so there are qualities of action. This means that they must somehow be visible in order to create value. So otherwise, they're hidden. But why are they important for teams? Let me explain you this with our performance relevance of values pyramid. So everything starts with trust. And you could also say it's about psychological safety-ness. Only when you have created trust, you can open yourself. You can open yourself for new things, but you can also open yourself for showing into topics which might be challenges or issues which might challenge the collaboration within a team. And with that, you have then created a feedback process, so to say. And you have created a transparency. And with that transparency, then, you can identify blind spots, and you will see things which might be, which have potential to be developed. And so, development would be the next step, and you will have the opportunity at the end to be more accountable, or the team can be more accountable and has a better chance to high perform. And of course, in every organization, you might find different values, and each organization might also identify specific values for themselves, but some of them, I can assure you, you will find always in there. So how to create or how to develop corporate values, very briefly. It's a little bit similar to the process we did before. You start doing an analysis of the current culture, you talk with a lot of people, you try to find out which values are lived very well or which ones are lagging. And then you try to build a consensus, and this, of course, should be done collaboratively, and you identify 4 to 6 relevant and meaningful values with employers and, of course, also the leadership. And then you start to define them. You start to create a common understanding about them. What do they mean for us? What does trust mean for you? What does it mean for me? And how can we bring them to life? How would this look like? What kind of behaviors do we need to live in order to bring them to life? And of course, they need, at the end, to be communicated and integrated within the organization. And this can happen, as I told you before, with train-the-trainer formats as an example. And of course, very important also is that the leadership, the integration, and role modeling, they of course should promote the values in order to really make this credible and also trustful. So what we've done, we have created, on the one side, scenarios which can give us an orientation about our vision, about our strategy, about our OKRs. And on the other side, we have developed our values. And it doesn't matter in which scenario we will end at the end. The one thing which will be constant will be the way of working, how we want to work together. So the values which are important for us as an organization. This will be the basis. It doesn't matter what happens outside. And believe me, it's going to be really, really rough, as we said before, a bad weather front, so to say, we have in front of us. And yeah, with that said, this is, I think, the values, one of the most important things we need to look at when working in an organization and when guiding our people through volatile times. And let me just show you one more slide when we now come back to the question how to implement OKRs. So, and this is something you can also use for almost any transformation or any change progress. It's about really letting the employers know what is important. So why do we need this change? So giving them an understanding and also a motivation for the change. Otherwise, they won't have the motivation and they won't really move. We need to tell them what would happen if we don't do this change and what are the benefits if we go into the change. So we need to create a change narrative. On the other side, we need to enable the people with skills and competencies in order to live agility or an OKR framework. And we will need to adapt structures within the organization in order to implement the OKR events in order to adapt our operational system within the organization. And last but not least, of course, again, it's really important for the leadership also to live it and to also be part of the process and to promote the process, because otherwise this won't work. Thank you very much.